I am 78 years old, and I learned something too late. Time does not wait for apologies. At this age, you begin to notice how quiet the world becomes around you. Not because the world has changed, but because the people who filled it are no longer here to speak. Their voices fade first. Their habits disappear next. Eventually, even their absence becomes ordinary. I live alone now, in a small house that once felt full. In the mornings, I sit by the window with a cup of coffee I usually forget to finish. The street outside is the same street I've watched for nearly 40 years. The same trees, the same sidewalk cracks. But most of the people I once knew along this street are gone. Some moved away, some died, some simply drifted out of reach in ways that happen so slowly you barely notice. There are days when the only sound in the house is the clock in the hallway. It ticks loudly now. I don't remember it being this loud before. Maybe it always was. Maybe I was just too busy to hear it. When you are younger, time feels patient. You think it will wait while you figure things out, while you work longer hours, while you hold on to your pride a little longer than you should. You assume there will always be another afternoon, another conversation, another chance to say what should have been said earlier. I believed that for most of my life, and I carried that belief into a silence that never got repaired. The apology I should have made never reached the person who needed to hear it. That is the thing about time. It keeps moving, even when you decide to stand still. I suppose I should tell you about him. His name was Daniel. We met when we were both 23. Two young men working the same dull office job in a brick building that smelled like paper and dust. It was the kind of place where people stayed longer than they meant to. Daniel had an easy way about him. He laughed often, and not loudly, just enough to make the room feel less stiff. I remember noticing that right away. We started eating lunch together because our schedules happened to line up. At first, we talked about ordinary things: work complaints, baseball scores, the price of rent. Over time, those lunches stretched longer. We began meeting on weekends, sometimes for a drink, sometimes just to walk around the city with no particular destination. Friendship grows like that when you're young, quietly, without ceremony. Before long, he was the person I called whenever something happened in my life. When I got my first promotion, he was the first one I told. When my father died, he was the one who sat with me in the hospital hallway while the doctor explained what had already happened. Daniel had that kind of presence. He didn't rush your feelings. He didn't offer big speeches. He just stayed. I realize now how rare that kind of person is, but when you're young, you assume people like that will always be there. Years passed. We both married, bought houses not too far apart. Our lives settled into the rhythm most people fall into. Work during the week, family dinners, occasional weekends where we met for coffee and talked about things that seemed important at the time. We were busy men, but the friendship stayed steady. At least I thought it did. Looking back, I can see the small ways things began to change. Not suddenly, never suddenly. It starts with a canceled plan here and there, a phone call you promised to return later, Later stretches into days, then weeks, but no one says anything about it because everyone is busy. I remember one evening Daniel invited me to his daughter's school play. I had stayed late at work that day and decided I was too tired to go. I told him I'd make the next one. There was always going to be a next one. Another time he asked if I could help him move a piece of furniture. It wasn't anything heavy, just a bookcase he couldn't handle alone. I told him I'd come by the following weekend, but something came up. I don't even remember what it was now. Work, probably. It always seemed important at the time. The strange thing about regret is that it often grows from moments that looked harmless when they happened. You don't recognize them as turning points. They just feel like ordinary decisions. And ordinary decisions, repeated often enough, slowly build a distance between people. Daniel and I still spoke, but less often. Conversations became shorter, schedules harder to match. I noticed it, but I didn't worry. Friendships like ours felt permanent, or at least I believed they were. The disagreement came years later. By then we were both in our early 50s, old enough to have settled opinions, young enough to defend them too strongly. It started during dinner in a restaurant we had visited for years. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place with soft lights and wooden tables. We were talking about money, investments, work decisions. Daniel had recently left a stable job to start something on his own. I told him I thought it was a mistake. Not gently either. I remember the way my voice sounded. Firm, certain. I spoke as if I knew his life better than he did. Daniel listened quietly at first. Then he told me he wasn't asking for my approval, just my support. I said something careless after that. I don't remember the exact words, but I remember the look on his face. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. That's worse in some ways. We left the restaurant early that night. The walk to the parking lot felt longer than usual. He said we should talk again soon. I said yes, but something in the air between us had changed. In the days that followed, I thought about calling him. Several times, actually. I would pick up the phone, then put it down again. Pride is a quiet thing. It doesn't shout. It just whispers that you should wait, that the other person should call first, that you were right anyway. Weeks passed, then months. I assumed the silence would break eventually. It didn't. Years later, I saw him once at a grocery store. We recognized each other immediately. That kind of familiarity doesn't disappear. We spoke politely, asked about our families, the weather. The conversation lasted maybe 2 minutes. 2 minutes between two men who once shared decades of life. As we walked away, I thought about apologizing. The words sat there in my throat. But I told myself it would feel awkward in the middle of the produce aisle. I told myself I would call him later instead. Later. That word followed me through most of my life. Later, when things calm down. Later, when I find the right moment. Later, when the conversation won't feel uncomfortable. Later became a habit, and habits shape the direction of a life more than we realize. The phone call never happened. Then one afternoon, about 12 years ago, I received a message from someone we both knew. Daniel had been sick. Cancer. I hadn't known. He had kept it mostly private. By the time I heard about it, he had already passed. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with the phone still in my hand. The room felt strangely still, not dramatic, just quiet. I thought about all the years that had passed since that dinner, all the chances I had to reach out, all the small, stubborn reasons I had found not to. The apology I had saved for the right moment had run out of time. Funerals are strange gatherings. You stand in a room filled with people who knew different versions of the same person. They tell stories. They laugh softly at memories. I listen to them talk about Daniel, his generosity, his patience, the way he helped people without making a show of it. None of it surprised me. I had known those things about him for decades, but hearing them after he was gone felt different. It made the silence between us feel heavier. After the service, his daughter came over to thank me for coming. She told me he used to talk about our friendship often, even in the years when we stopped seeing each other. I didn't know what to say to that. Some sentences arrived too late to matter. The house is quieter now than it used to be. My wife passed away 5 years ago. My children live in other cities. They visit when they can, but most days it's just me here, and the clock in the hallway. It ticks steadily, like it always has. I've had plenty of time to think in this stage of life, more time than I ever allowed myself before. And the thing I keep returning to is how ordinary the mistake was. There was no dramatic betrayal, no single moment where everything broke. Just two men who allowed pride and time to do their quiet work. I don't blame myself in the angry way I once might have. Age softens that kind of thinking. But the absence remains. There are conversations we never finished, questions I never asked him, words I assumed could wait. They didn't. If you are listening to this, and you are younger than I am, I won't tell you what you should do. People don't live their lives according to instructions anyway. But I will tell you what I wish someone had explained to me earlier. Time moves forward, whether you resolve things or not. It doesn't pause while you sort out your pride. It doesn't slow down while you wait for the perfect moment to speak. It simply continues. And one day, the person you meant to call is no longer there to answer. You don't get a final conversation to tidy things up. Life doesn't work that way. Some things simply end. I still think about Daniel sometimes when I pass that old restaurant. It's still open. Different staff now, different customers. But the tables are the same. I once walked inside a few years ago and sat near the window where we used to talk. The young waiter asked if I was meeting someone. I told him no, just having dinner. He nodded and walked away. There was nothing unusual about the moment to him. But to me, it felt like sitting across from a chair that would never be filled again. That's the shape regret often takes in old age. Not loud, just quiet spaces where someone used to be. I don't expect forgiveness anymore. Life has already moved past the point where that conversation could happen. What remains is memory, and the understanding that time is far less patient than we believe. I'm 78 now. My days are simpler than they used to be. I read, I walk a little, I sit by the window. Sometimes I speak out loud in the house without realizing it. Old habits. I don't know how many years I have left. No one does. but I've stopped saving important words for later. Later has a way of disappearing. If I have learned anything at this age, it is that silence grows heavier the longer it sits between people. And time, once it moves past something, never circles back. It just keeps going.